My first question is, what do you want? That's it. We're in a 2-day conference, the Unlock the Leader Bootcamp. And my first question is, what do you want? And you'll be surprised at the blank faces, the stares of numbness of, I have no idea what I want. Because we go through life so fast, doing our business, our families, our kids, our communities, whatever those things are. And we rarely sit down and just ask ourselves, what do I want?
Hey, it's Rocky. Welcome to Richer Soul. Today's guest is Yigal Adato, who will teach us about unlocking our leadership. Imagine it's 12 months from now, and you've achieved your major life goals. How does it feel to be in the best shape of your life? To wake up energized, excited about the day? To have great relationships and friends who support you and propel you forward? How does it feel to have an excess of money, to be able to make the choices you want? To be fearless and open to trying new adventures? Imagine being connected to the universe and it providing everything you desire. It's possible over time, and your past does not dictate your future. The only thing holding you back from this vision is you. It's time to take control of our thoughts and use them to our advantage. Welcome to Richer Soul, where we achieve our dreams and create harmony to health, wealth, relationships, time, and spirituality. If you have not had a chance to listen to episodes 1 through 9, I encourage you to go back and listen to the framework behind Richer Soul and how to create the life of your dreams. You can also find all the show notes for this episode at richersoul.com. Speaking of leaders, today's quote is from Steve Jobs. Simple can be harder than complex. You have to work hard to get your thinking clean to make it simple. But it's worth it in the end because once you get there, you can move mountains. I'm told to give a 60-minute speech doesn't take long to prepare, but to give a 10-minute talk requires a lot of prep time because you have to get clear. That's probably why people spend months on end when they prepare their TED Talks. They gotta get it down. Hey, speaking of talks, would you like to meet me in person? I'm going to be in Phoenix speaking at a conference on real estate and wealth building and just hanging out with some of my friends, some who you may have heard on other episodes on the podcast. We're just going to be talking about life and money. I'd love to see you if you can make it. I will put in the show notes a link on how to get your ticket. Today, our topic is unlocking the leader inside us. So often we get stuck. We deal with life and it grinds on us. Of course, we can always overcome, and that's what it's all about. We covered 2 big topics today, creating culture and asking ourselves, what do we really want? It's one of those things we tend to gloss over, but today we will dig deep into them. Yigal Adato helps business owners across the country implement battle-tested leadership skills into their business and life so they can make more money, have less stress, and live that epic life. And that's what it's all about, isn't it? He is a 3rd-generation pawnbroker, and he has built multi-million-dollar business operations. He is a business and leadership coach who has been in the trenches, managed hundreds of team members, and knows what it takes to make leaders and businesses successful. Let's meet our guest. Welcome to Richer Soul, Yigal Adato. It's great to have you join us today.
Honored to be here. Thank you so much.
And I'm excited to learn from you today. We always like to start at the beginning. What was it like when you were growing up, and how much did your family and school teach you about money?
I'm a 1st-generation immigrant. My parents came from Turkey. I was born in Istanbul, 1982. Grew up here learning the language, going to school. My father and my grandfather had a successful business back in Turkey. And so they were always entrepreneurs. Came over here, had some setbacks, opened businesses, lost money. But the way I grew up was that, and what I learned and what I saw from this was that when you made money, you weren't present at home. Because in the community that I was in, those who had money were nowhere to be found. They were always working. My grandfather worked 14 hours a day. Father, uncles, everybody worked so much. They provided, and I'm blessed with the childhood that I have, but they weren't there. They were absent. So I grew up with this idea that if you work hard, you make money, then you're not home for the family.
So did they teach you any money skills, or it was more just you watching and seeing what happened?
My father was an incredible mentor when it came to business, customer service. That was, how to market back in the day. My father owned a chain of pawn shops. That's PAWN, not PORN. And he opened up his first shop, and he would buy donuts from the guy next door and give away a free donut to every customer who walked in every morning. He would give away jewelry. I mean, he just did so much, and he grew an incredible business with my uncle, my grandfather. So I learned what to do, and I also got to see what not to do at the same time.
So what was it that you learned not to do?
Not to do. Not have clarity with your partners when you work. I learned not to be a slave to the business. My father worked so much at work, 7 days a week, 14 hours a day, to the point where in the future, I kind of emulated that. And we'll talk about that. I learned that better late than never doesn't exist. My father was 58 years old, ran a company doing millions and millions of dollars, and he was diagnosed with Parkinson's and dementia. And within about 12 to 18 months, could no longer walk well, talk well, or take care of himself. So I learned that you can't say, I'm going to work really hard today and I'll enjoy later, because sometimes you can't enjoy the later.
So true. So is it like the TV show? I don't know what the Pawn something.
Like Pawn Stars or Hardcore Pawn. No. So yeah, I love the question. I get it all the time. 99.9% of the product that comes in is jewelry, diamonds, PS4s, PS5s, televisions, laptops. It's what the working community has in stock. What TV shows you are these crazy items that these collectors have that is good for TV. Rarely did that stuff come in. I mean, we got a Civil War sword. We got a skull. We got some pictures, like real pictures of concentration camps from the Holocaust. So very minute amount of that stuff, but that's good for TV. Truthfully, we helped people who just needed $25 to put gas in their car to get their work because they lived paycheck to paycheck.
And so I always grew up with a pawn shop was like you gave them something and they gave you cash, but usually you came back and bought it back. But I'm guessing most people don't come back for their stuff, do they?
92% of people come back for their stuff.
Oh, they do?
Yeah.
So do you have to hold it for a certain period of time?
Yes. So depending on the state, here in California, we hold it for 4 months plus a 30-day grace period. What state are you in?
I'm in Pennsylvania.
I think Pennsylvania is a 60-day hold. So it just depends where you are in the country. There's different regulations, different rules. And essentially, when you pawn the item, you can come back, pay the principal plus the interest and take it out. You can just pay the interest and we'll just renew the loan. Or you can just not come back for it and you've already signed title over to the pawn shop. So there's no hassle calling, where's my money? There's none of that stuff. It's a non-recourse loan, so it doesn't hit your credit, none of that type of stuff.
Well, because it's collateral based.
Correct.
So they don't have to. I didn't realize that high a percentage of people came back for their stuff.
Well, you have to realize what they're pawning is they're pawning their jewelry that they got from their, husband, wife, grandparents. They're pawning their video game system, their laptop that they use at work or school. So they're pawning everyday items that they need, but they just need $50 or $100. Luckily, I've never been in that situation where I had to use a pawn shop. Like I said, my father did very well for himself, thankfully. But people who work paycheck to paycheck and they pop a tire and the tire costs $100 and that's not in the budget, they need to come up with $100 to get the tire, to drive to work, to drive their kids to school. So we are a short-term loan, or, I sold my pawn shops, but it's vilified. People don't understand it. When you do understand it, you appreciate how humble people have to be to walk into the store and ask for a loan, and the good that the pawn shops do in the area. Now, like every single business, there are crooks and thieves in the industry. There are horrible doctors, horrible lawyers, horrible accountants, horrible politicians. They exist, of course, but there's very, very good pawnbrokers out there as well.
It's interesting because it's for many of us, it's not a world we live in. And so it's just a different situation. And around me, we don't see, I don't know why. Pennsylvania doesn't seem to have a big pawn shop. But like when I go down to Florida for vacation, I see them everywhere. It seems to be much more prevalent down there. And just different markets have different needs.
Well, that and two things. One, if you don't need a pawn shop to pawn, go shopping at a pawn shop. It's really incredible shopping. You save a ton of money, use tools, all that type of stuff. Like diamonds, people are like, oh, I don't want to buy a diamond at a pawn shop. It has bad mojo. Well, we would sell the diamonds that we couldn't sell to the dealers. Dealers sold them to jewelry stores. So you're buying that stone anyways. So go get a better deal. And Florida, for example, Pennsylvania's interest rate is much lower. And Florida has a much higher interest rate per month. So that's why you'll see a higher amount of pawn shops there.
That makes sense. Business climate is what drives the opportunities and what happens in those particular areas.
Correct.
So did you follow your family? It sounds like you went into the pawn shop business as well.
I did. I first wanted nothing to do with the pawn shop. I remember I worked at a pawn shop one summer. I was 16 years old. I needed some money for gas. I just got my license. And my dad put me in the vault with 30,000 jewelry envelopes, and he made me do inventory. And 1 hour, 2 hours, 3 hours passed by. In the fourth hour, I stood up and I just told myself, I don't want to be like my dad. I don't want to work 14 hours a day and 7 days a week and not be around and lose my health. And so I got up and I said, Dad, I don't want to be like you. I'm out of here. So I did what the next best thing would be. I became a rock star, started a band, went on tour, groupies. I opened for Woodstock 99. I enjoyed every moment of it. But about 6 years into that journey, I was a broke rock star. And my brother had opened up his own pawn shop, and he said, hey, Yigal, come just help me out a couple of days a week. I hate doing the accounting stuff, all the back end stuff. So I was helping him there. One day became 2, became 3, became 4. And yes, I started to work 7 days a week, 14 hours a day at the pawn shop.
So how'd that turn out?
It was 2 years of a lot of hard work. I learned a lot about business, from marketing to legal to accounting to customer journey. I mean, you name it, sales. And we built an incredible company. We opened a multi-million-dollar pawn shop that we were running, and obviously then hired on people, teams, and didn't have to work so hard until my wife one day sat me down and basically said, I didn't get married to be alone, so I had to figure out the not working 7 days a week, 14 hours a day. And about 7 years ago, after building a great organization, I started coaching my managers to become better leaders. I had learned leadership from a youth organization that I was in, and I just realized this is what I love to do. So I sold my portion of the pawn shop to my brother and went out to coach full-time and consult.
What was the youth leadership program you were part of?
Yeah. So at the age of about 5 years old, I joined a Jewish youth leadership group here in San Diego. And you go up the ranks. Every year you have a different group of kids and you play games. At the age of 15, you're put through a leadership program to become a counselor. So at the age of 16, I became a counselor to kids. So I had to learn how to lead. And then at about 21, I became the leadership director for the counselors. So I would take them on trips and train them in leadership. And then I kind of just forgot about all that training. Went into the rock stardom, pawn shop. And then, I remember one day I told my brother, I said, you know what, do you mind if I bring this leadership knowledge that I learned in my youth organization? And he said, do whatever you want, just don't mess up my sales. I said, fine. So started doing activities and leadership development for my team and meetings and culture creation. And we were able to take the business from $1 million a year. And in about 18 months, we started doing $5 million. So within about 24 months.
So what was it that changed that allowed you to multiply your sales like that?
So we started giving more clarity to the team. Where are we financially? What's going on? Why do the numbers matter? Why do the metrics matter? We started talking about, courage and who are their leaders. It's kind of like the first three things I talk about in the Unlock the Leader program. We give them more clarity, more courage, and taught them how to commit to themselves and the business. And when we did that, the culture started to grow. The team members below them, they started to work more efficiently and effectively. Sales started to occur. Customer service increased. And I realized, Rocky, that leadership isn't just another tactic or strategy. It's an amplifier of everything that you give your team. So if you teach them customer service or sales or marketing, when you add leadership to it, it amplifies all of those. And so that's what it did.
So this is the question I get a lot of times because we talk about sharing finances within the company and making sure that everyone understands the metrics of what's going on in their particular position. So were you giving them all of the numbers or were you just giving them a portion of what was going on within the business?
So every store manager, we had 3 locations at one point. Every store manager had the P&L of their location, the balance sheet of their location, and they would know what corporate would spend, right? So what was allocated from corporate to them using the bookkeeper, using the marketing, so on and so forth. And they had a budget of how much they needed to sell, pawn, layaway, spend. And we were very forthright about that because without clarity, you can't lead a business. So I work with a lot of people who tell me, well, my manager doesn't know the finances. And I say, well, how can they know what you want them to hit or why they need to hit it? It's really easy to say, I need, $50,000 in sales. I'm just making up a number. But if the leader doesn't know the why behind it, then they don't actually work as efficiently to get there.
And I've always said, if you don't have a scoreboard, you can't tell the score. You don't know who won. You don't know how you're doing. And too often then people don't hit their numbers because they don't even know what they are, or they're not tied directly. So did you tie their numbers to bonuses or something so that they got compensation based on them?
Yeah. So the sales team would do commission and then the managers would get bonuses based on the budgets.
Okay. So hitting their goals.
Yep.
And making it through with that. Interesting. I think that's a big part of it is creating the right metrics for people to follow and then helping them understand why. So I'm assuming at the manager level, what was the why? Like you said, okay, we gave you this number, 50,000 in sales. What's an example of the why behind it?
So first and foremost, we explained the why of the product, right? So we started creating a mission that wasn't, oh, you need to write more loans. We were hope dealers. Because when somebody came in and they needed $50, we gave them hope. And so we embedded that hope mentality into the team so they would deal more hope, right? Instead of, in the areas that we're in, there was a lot of drug dealers. So we became hope dealers. And when they start to understand that every time you write a new loan, you give somebody hope, you help them solve a problem, they saw the product a different way. If somebody needs to come and buy a necklace, a gift, you gave them hope that they can give their wife or husband a gift that was worthy of what they deserved based on the money that they had, right? So I'm working with a popsicle shop at the moment for their culture and their leadership. And at first, the owners were like, yeah, we sell popsicles. And I said, well, that's not going to give anybody the want or the why to sell more popsicles. And I asked the question, I said, what do they get when they're eating the popsicle? And one of the partners said, oh, I get joy when I eat one. I said, that's it. We're going to be joy dealers. You're going to give a moment of joy. Because while you're eating that deliciousness popsicle in your mouth, you forget about the world. You're happy. Some chemical, something happens as sugar is put into your mouth, right? And so now we started to move forward with this, and their sales are increasing because of it. The team is happier. The culture is behind this whole, it's about joy and not the popsicle. That makes sense.
It makes sense. When you go in and you do that, do all the employees come along, or do you find friction sometimes?
You'll find some friction in the long-term employees, right? Some of the long-term employees who've been there, well, this is how we've always done it. If you change it, it's not going to work. And unfortunately, I'm of the belief of you coach up or you coach out. So we had a client who had 3 locations, about 28 team members. We came in, and this is going to scare some people listening, but we turned over about 87% of the workforce. And we gave them an opportunity. We coached them, and it didn't work. And we basically said, if you're not going to be on board, then we'll share you with a competition, or you're more likely to go somewhere else. And some of them did.
I usually see it at the other end of the spectrum, where we try and encourage people to hire to their culture and hire to their values. Because even if you get a rock star who comes in, who's great at what they do, if they don't fit your culture or your values, more likely than not, they're going to create a mess in your organization. And I think you've dealt with that, haven't you, in some of your coaching or organizations?
For sure. 100%. So somebody comes in, rock star, and I'll even take it a step further. You might have the values system there, the culture there, but it's not clarified. And so the owner's saying, yeah, this is our value system, and this is our mission statement, this is our vision statement, but they've never practiced that with the team. And so when you don't clarify that, and you're not consistently putting that ideal into the mind of the team, then that rock star comes in, sees gaps everywhere, sees that this is out of integrity, and one of 2 things happens. 1, they leave, or 2, they just come down to mediocre level like the rest of the team.
So how do you make sure that everyone is on the same page with you?
Yeah. So first and foremost, what I do is unlock the leader. So the biggest thing is with the leadership, they have to unlock their potential to be able to lead. Because it's really easy to go read a book and write your mission, vision, values, and go to a leadership course, and that's it. But if you're not unlocking these things, and let me explain to you why I call it unlock the leader. I call it unlock the leader because we go through life and things happen to us. I'll give you a great example. 2020 was a rough year for a lot of us. Okay? I'm going to add on to that roughness by wife and I had our 3rd baby. Mom had a stroke. Father passed away. And do I know how to lead? Absolutely. But my leadership gets locked up with life events and things that happen. And so we've got to learn how to use the right key and the right lock to unlock these things to be able to keep moving forward in leadership. And so I go into the team, we unlock the leader, what's actually happening, what's going on personally, and then we can give that sentiment, that feeling to the team. And often that doesn't happen. You have that disconnect between leadership and team. Leadership wanting to shove culture and values down the throat of the team. The team's like, what are you doing? Pushing back, chill out. And that's where the friction comes in.
So how do you overcome that friction?
Yeah. So first we work with the leadership. We change their whole mindset, right? And we let them know this is going to be a slow process. Then we tell the team, hey, we're going to be making some changes slowly but surely. You ask them their opinion. You ask them what do you guys think, right? You're always asking feedback from the team. You're going to get people, when I first did this in my business, I had one of our long-term managers throw the keys at me and say, if this is how it's going to be, I'm not coming in tomorrow. And I said, so be it, right? You're going to go through some mud. It's going to happen. You're going to be uncomfortable. It's going to happen. But there's light at the end of the tunnel, and you have to be willing to lead through the mud to get to the light.
I think there's a quote I read recently. It's, are you willing to wait for the mud to settle so you can see the clarity of the water? And it does take time. So on average, if you're trying to bring about the change and to instill the culture, how long do you tell people it usually takes?
So what we first do is that we have 3 stages, right? The first is the unlock the leader stage. You come with me 2 days, we unlock your leadership, we go deep, and we bring out what's necessary to be able to lead the team. Then second stage is unlock the team. We start reworking the culture, the mission, the vision, the values, the clarity, the creativity of the team, the consistency, the communication, slowly but surely. And then we unlock the business, right? So it's in stages. The learning process of this takes about 90 days, right? To learn the methodology. Then implementation, I've had people implement it within 6 months. I've had people take 3 years because of their hard-headedness to just say, okay, I'm going to be coachable. I'm going to do what you say. Let's rock and roll. An example of this rock. I have a client who's been with me for 4 years. And I've been telling him for 3.5 of them, you need an implementer, right? You're the visionary. You're an implementer. You need somebody to organize. Let's go. Okay, I don't know. We'll see. It's going to cost me too much money, blah, 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 blah. Finally hires the implementer 6 months ago. He goes from 1 store to 3. Revenues boost like crazy. And he looks at me, he's like, Yigal, I'm such an idiot. I should have listened to you before. I told you. It's like, but thanks for, sticking through it and doing the work. Some people it takes longer.
Today's episode is sponsored by Profit Answer Man Podcast. Did you know that most small business owners hate looking at their financials? It's one reason they may struggle with business success. The Profit Answer Man podcast helps them ensure they are profitable and can pay their employees and weather the storms we all have to face. It's built on the Profit First methodology of pay yourself first. The Profit Answer Man podcast is a must-listen to for every small business owner and anyone who wants to help them survive and thrive. Check it out on your favorite listening platform. Every visionary needs an implementer. It's not their zone of genius, and they will drive everybody crazy because they bounce all over the place and keep taking different directions, and nobody actually implements anything that they talk about.
Yep. And the problem also, like, I'm a visionary. I have my implementer thing, thankfully. And what happens is that the visionary takes it and they go to a conference, they go to a meeting, they join a mastermind, and it's like, let me implement everything at the same time. It's like, no. Hold up a second. You do that, you're going to drive yourself crazy, the team crazy, and your clients crazy. So you have to take it slow, one step at a time, get it to 80%, move on, and hold that first step accountable and keep moving forward.
So how do we unlock people's potential?
So I take them through this 10 key process. First, it's clarity. And what I mean by clarity is I ask them, it's a very simple question. It's very hard to answer for some reason. And I know the reason. I'll tell you what that is. My first question is, what do you want? That's it. We're in a 2-day conference, the Unlock the Leader Bootcamp. And my first question is, what do you want? And you'll be surprised at the blank faces, the stares of numbness of, I have no idea what I want. Because we go through life so fast, doing our business, our families, our kids, our communities, whatever those things are. And we rarely sit down and just ask ourselves, what do I want? And there's 4 areas of life that we talk about in the what do I want. There's your connections, your relationships, and your friendships. There's your condition, which is your health, your physical health. There's your currency, which is your money. And then there's your conviction, which is either your faith or your inner strength, whatever you believe in. That's fine by me. And when I take them through this process, we look through, what is it that you want? Where are you currently at the moment in these stages? Right? We have to be realistic. When my wife told me I didn't get married to be alone, I was 40 pounds overweight. We were barely having sex. I was coming home 7 p.m., having dinner, knocking out on the couch, falling asleep. Like, it just wasn't a good moment in my life. And I have to be real with what actually happened. And then we talk about the courage to take action. Now, we've all had a courageous moment in our lives that either we've forgotten about or we don't feel is courageous enough to share with people. And when I go through this exercise, you'd be amazed and surprised at the stories and what actually comes up and how courageous people actually are. I'll give you an example. In one of our trainings, one of the gentlemen shared that he was 16, got his 16-year-old girlfriend pregnant. Parents were very well off and basically said, if you don't get an abortion, I'm cutting you off. And he said, absolutely not. Took his 16-year-old girlfriend, flew across the country, found a job, raised the kid, and he was at my training. And he had forgot, like he just didn't even think about that that's something courageous that he did in his life. And so when we're leaders and we think about what we want personally or professionally, if we unlock our courage, then we can actually go to work and do what needs to be done. And last but not least is commitment. What does that look like? How do we commit to something? How do we keep our word? How do we do what we're going to say? And how do we commit to ourselves to make sure that we're going to lead through this regardless of what's thrown at us?
I find most people don't take action. They don't take the first step. They don't follow up. They don't continue to do it. Like when I was in corporate, I had one boss. He always said, showing up is 90% of the game. Mm-hmm. You show up, you're ahead of most people. And I don't know, to me, it's kind of sad.
I think there's a lot of, what happens when I work with a lot of people is that there's a lot of fear. There's a lot of locked up, we call it locked up leadership. So you'll have a CEO, managers, supervisors, they're in the position, but they're locked up and they can't take the step. It's like, have you ever seen a picture of like Harry Houdini, who's in like a straight jacket and then he's got chains around him and locks. And that's how we're walking through life trying to lead. And because of those fears, we're not taking the step. Some people don't care about, I don't care what you think and where I'm going to go. And sometimes it creates massive success. But some people have been conditioned through their families, through their parents, through generationally to fear those judgments and what people are going to think. So it stops them.
Lots of childhood programming. That's why we start with the first question that I asked you about. How'd you learn about money? Yeah. Because on the financial side, if they're locked up with their money, they're never going to get it.
And listen, I've been going to therapy 11 years every week. And not because I'm insane, right? But because that's what my mom said. She's like, why don't you just talk to me? And I said, well, half of the therapy is talking about you, Mom. I can't talk to you about it. She wasn't too happy with that comment, but that's okay. And, but you know, leading, I have a saying, it's leading with baggage is misleading. And if you're in a leadership position, it's your responsibility and duty to get the programming out of your head, to get that clarity so that you can lead at a level that other people are not used to, and that you lead without that baggage that you're carrying around.
It's funny. Every time I read a psychology book or a mindset book, I'm like, these aren't psychology and mindset books. These are parenting books. Y'all screwed up.
And all the books that I read, I'm going to make mistakes. It happens, right? We're going to make mistakes. I don't care how many parenting books, psychology books you read. But the one thing that, the biggest thing that I realized that made a big difference in my life as a leader and as a parent was something called, and there's different versions of it. There's like social contagion, emotional contagion. And we grouped it and we call it leader contagion. And what social contagion and emotional contagion is basically, if I was to show up to this interview and I was to come up and say, hey, Rocky, nice to meet you. It's okay. You're going to try to, bring the fire like you are, but at some point we're going to level each other off. So how I walk into a room as a leader rubs off on my team, rubs off on my clients. And if you don't take care of yourself mentally, you're going to walk in and give that off and then expect your team to make more money, sell more, follow up more, right? Take those steps. And they're not going to, because they're showing up how you show up.
And that's a big part of what we talk about. If one part of your life is not going well, then it's going to leak into every other part of your life. And until you fix that one part of your life, the rest of it's never going to work. And that's always a struggle. And you have to figure out, there are all these different parts of life. You name the ones that you talk about, which are very much similar in alignment to what we talk about here with health, wealth, relationships, spirituality. We talk about time management because you only have so much. So how do you manage that? The right mindsets. being able to do that, and then having purpose, right? Having clarity of what do I want, which is kind of what you talked about. And I have found that when you get these things down and you focus on them, then life becomes a lot more fun and it becomes great. And you just have to do it.
And you don't just focus on them once. It's a daily activity. You have to focus on them just like you focus on your money, or hopefully you do. That's what you want people to do, right? You've got to focus on your relationships and your connections and your health all the time. And when you get good at it, it becomes a lot easier to do. Yes, there's hiccups, things happen, but it's part of who we are and the life that we're going to live. And if you want to live it optimally and lead, then you have to be responsibility for those areas.
Well, in the same way you have negative programming, you can have positive programming. So if you set up your positive programming, after a while, it becomes natural. It's natural that you go to the gym. It's natural that you don't eat sugar. It's natural that every week you take time to go out with people or make phone calls or email people and follow up. But you have to redo your programming. And as we, just as you've talked about, it is not easy. Here you are, you're with the therapist for 11 years. You're still going, here you are doing great in life. And yet, in spite of that, we still have to continue to work at it.
I call it my mental tune-up. I go every single week. I sit down. It's Thursdays, 1 p.m., and I just get it all out. And then I go back to kicking butt. I need that. There's certain things I talk about with my wife. I share everything with her. Then we fight. Something happens. I talk to the therapist about the wife. Something doesn't work in business. Talk about that with the therapist. About my daughters, same thing. So for me, it's not fair to lead if I'm not okay. And so I'm going to do everything I can to be okay so I can show up in the way I want others to show up.
And I think that's most important. And I just would assume that this stuff was the standard, but it's not.
I think it's taught here and there, but people get so preoccupied and busy that it's forgotten. And the worst part about it is that a lot of our friendships or connections don't call us out. If one of my friends, if I'm at a dinner with my guy friends and he's talking a bunch of smack, about his wife, if I was to say, hey, Rocky, why don't you stop talking so much smack about your wife and tell me why you're the problem? What are you doing? He'd be like, oh, come on, bro. What are you talking about? Because everybody else is saying, yeah, wives, they can suck sometimes. And it's, women, and blah, 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 blah. And there's just like this conversation that is the brotherhood of the miserable. And we're not calling each other out saying like, hey, why don't you stop the pity party and tell me what you can do to be better? And so we've been allowed to just go about it and be in misery and talk the way we talk.
Interesting. I'm not so good at being politically correct. I have a tendency to say what I think, and sometimes it gets me in trouble, but I don't care.
That's what matters. You don't care, right? Because so many people care so much and are not willing to take the step to say what's needed to be said. I call them courageous conversations, right?
And so, the reason I do it is because I've always been frustrated that people won't tell me the truth. I'm like, I'm spending 10 years of my life going nowhere. Why won't any of you tell me the truth to help me improve? Yeah. And so that's why I just find it better to be honest. Let's talk about the elephants in the room and then let's move on.
So it sounds like, and I'm going to make an assumption, you were either instilled with this when you grew up, like I'm going to say what I say and just be direct and whatever, or you've done work on yourself. And I feel that when you talk to somebody who's done work on themselves, leadership development, whatever that is, they can take it a little bit more. But if not, some people get defensive and they start, they stop listening and start speaking and it gets really mushy.
So for me, it was cultural. Okay. In Turkey, are people blunt with each other?
Yes.
Yeah.
They are.
Mm-hmm.
But sometimes depends on the family. My family was very, push stuff under the rug, be nice, have this. I want everybody's perception of us to be like, we're okay. Everything's fine. we're the Adato family, everything's okay. So that's how I grew up. And so I had to reprogram that for sure.
I just find a lot of other cultures are much more blunt or direct. Mm-hmm. And it's even funny because even in England, I would see it. You see people correcting each other in public. I don't know if it still happens, but as I've been around the world, I've noticed the rest of the world. And to be honest, I think the United States used to be like that, because when I was a kid, like, you did wrong and the whole neighborhood was correcting you, right? we stopped doing that. That societally, I think it's changed here. But if you don't get that feedback, then you're going to constantly go down the wrong path, or you're going to struggle and you wonder why.
100%. 100%. So if that's where you came from, like your heritage and culture, then kudos. I think it's a step ahead of many, because a lot of people are stuck, even at the workplace, not being able to just tell the truth.
I think my problem was I had to learn to soften the sandpaper. Is that right? Take the bluntness off.
Let's add some EQ in there, some emotional.
Yes, I had to add the EQ in. That was the part that was missing. I've learned over time, But we do coaching, and I'll be honest. So we have a saying, and it's more designed for the business owner. Average business owners want to be left alone. Mm-hmm. Good business owners want to be coached. Great business owners want to be told the truth.
Wow. I love that.
And so the question is, where are you in that? And are you willing to handle the truth? And to me, that's the most important thing, because otherwise you're working hard and you're getting nowhere, right? You're constantly struggling, and so many businesses do struggle. So let's just listen. And I think the constant saying is, the reflection in the mirror is the problem.
And you said, tell the truth. I have a close family member who couldn't tell the truth, and because of it, lost his business, his wife, family, money. And it was all because he couldn't raise his hand and say, hey, I need help. Hey, I no longer know how to do X, Y, Z, or I no longer know how to pivot, or I just can't change. And so because of the ego, right? The ego drove I built this, I can do it on my own. It caused the fall of everything.
I think sometimes it's not even just ego. It's you get stuck in a rut and you don't even realize you're in that rut, and that's the way that you're behaving. And too often we don't say anything and say, you know what, your path is going the wrong direction. It's time to change it.
It's funny, you talk about bluntness, and I'm looking at a book that I read some months ago, and I worked with Robert Glover, and I'll show it to you, but it's called No More Mr. Nice Guy, right? And the book talks about how to be not blunt, but how to say what's on your mind and not worry about making people like you and caring what they think so much, but just telling the truth. And I think a great coach, like you just said, like yourself, tells the truth, even if it costs them the client. For me, had a client come to me. We were working for a while, admitted he was drinking 6 to 8 beers a day. And I said, hey, buddy, that's an issue. Let's talk about that. Canceled the contract and said, I think it's been great. Thank you so much. I'm done.
They don't want to face it.
They don't want to face it. 100%.
Well, and I think a book that it's been a while since I read it, is Crucial Conversations. Mm. But I think the most important thing that I've learned in all of this is to remove the action from the person. And even especially with kids, and a lot of that comes back to mindset, is not put the judgment on the person itself, but on what the outcomes or what is happening there. And so when you remove the personalization, it doesn't become an attack. And I'll admit that I still struggle with that one.
I'll take it to parenting with what you just said. It took me a while to learn, if my daughter does something crazy, I'm not going to say you're crazy or are you crazy? I'm going to say, whoa, that looks crazy. Or like, I'm going to put it to what she did and not put it on her. Because if I tell my daughter enough times, you're crazy, you're crazy, you're crazy, one night she's going to go to sleep, she's going to be like, my dad thinks I'm crazy. And I never want that.
Right.
So I separate the action in order for me to be lead effectively as a father, because then she's not even going to listen to me.
I always find the best leadership lessons come from parenting kids.
Oh, by far, had kids, leadership, I had to learn it. It wasn't like, oh, I should learn some more. It's like, you are about to learn it. Here's a couple of smacks in the face. Here you go. Marriage as well. Marriage as well. And running a nonprofit. I've run 2 of them in my life, and it's very tough. So those of you who do that, kudos to you.
Well, and in a nonprofit, people are volunteering their time and money. So you have to figure out how to motivate them to want to give and to be able to do that. And that is 100%. Not easy.
100%.
Are there any topics on leadership that we should have talked about today, but we didn't get a chance to?
I'll bring up 2 that are very, very important to me. One is creativity. I don't think I've seen in a book so far, I could be wrong, about creativity, how important it is to leadership. What I mean by creativity is, when did we get so serious? Right? When did becoming adult become so drab and so dry? And when you have fun and you're creative and you remember, I'll ask you this question, Rocky. Tell me something that you used to play with as a kid that just brought joy to your life.
When I was a kid, I had train sets.
And it brought joy to your life.
Yeah.
Playing with the trains. Parents could have been fighting. Whatever happened on the block was going on. You were playing with your trains and you were having a great time. You were being creative. You might have pretended like you were the train conductor, right? And as I said that, you smiled, and it brings back those memories of joy. And so we forget about that creativity, that fun. So when we're in meetings, it's all about like, in this client that I'm working with here, the popsicle shop, they were going to have a company meeting. And she told me the agenda, and I said, absolutely not. Throw it out the window, get rid of it. And I said, how do we turn all of this into fun and games and talk about the serious stuff? So we built 2 games into it, and she called me the next day. She said, Yigal, I've never seen so much engagement in my life, so much feedback, so much presence in my team, because we were creative to bring joy to the moment and not just make it so serious. I made a post the other day on Facebook that said, you don't have to be a Navy SEAL or a Fortune 500 CEO to be a leader. Because sometimes those 2 are so serious to get things done. The other thing that I talk about is consistency. I think it's important. Lack of consistency breeds insecurity. Forget about other people. It breeds it in yourself. And an example of this is, we just had New Year's. People say, I'm going to go to the gym. I'm going to go to the gym. They wake up, they don't go to the gym, right? Or they buy their gym membership. They don't go, and the subconscious tacks it up as a fail. They go, you said we were going to go, you didn't go. Then you do something else and it tags. So you get a lot of tax, right? Blah, blah, blah. When you want to open up a business, or you want to expand, open up another location, your subconscious says, wait a second, buddy, hold up. So many times you promised us that we were going to do something and you didn't. Why don't we sit at the TV, watch more seasons and more seasons of Netflix shows, eat a bunch of cookies, because we don't want to go through this insecurity that you've already given to us. So that's extremely important. What you say you're going to do, getting it done.
And I think fun is a big part of it, and enjoying that. And that's why I'm always confused with parents. I'm like, what do you mean parenting's not fun? I got to buy all the toys that I didn't get when I was a kid.
Yeah.
I learned like, oh, my kids don't like these as much as I did. Oh, well, but at least I got to play with them.
We have dance parties at home, right? We went on a hike on Sunday. In order to show other people to have fun, you've got to show up with fun. You want a culture of excitement and people having fun, you have to be fun. You can't just put it on the wall in a value system and then forget it.
No, and business should be fun.
Yes.
I think people forget that.
And I think that your team who works for you sometimes spends more time at work than they do at home. And if you send them home with stress, and listen to this carefully, if you send them home with stress, they're going to give that stress to their spouse, to their kids, and to their friends. So it's our responsibility as leaders to give joy to our team so they go home happy, give that happiness to their spouse, to their kids, and their friends.
I like it.
Thank you.
How open are people to doing that when you tell them that?
It all stems, and honestly, not a sales pitch, it all stems from unlocking the leader. When I've talked about this for 7 years on another podcast. I was the number one coach and consultant in the pawn shop industry, and I would say it over and over and over and over and over and over and over again and over again until we unlock the leader. Then people are like, oh, I got it. Because you're supposed to dive deep, and you have to dive deep to doing the work. Because if you don't, then people hear it. Yes, I love it. You know, behind Rocky, there's a big library of books, right? To my right-hand side that Rocky can't see, I have a big library of books. You can read all the books in the world, right? But like you said, if you don't take the first step, the action, then you just wasted your time.
Correct. And I'm very big on taking action and helping people to take action. And I think where people struggle is people think they have to take massive action. I tell people you just need to take one teeny little step, and you can take a step that has essentially no consequences. So, for example, we'll say, go back to your example. In January, you're going to start working out. Well, in December, the first step is find a gym close to you that you like. So just go look at 3 gyms and see if you like them.
Yeah.
And then pick one. Well, that wasn't that hard, right? You found one that you like. Okay. Ask for a Christmas present, gym clothes. Like, what do you need to get to the gym? Right. And I know you've had Mike Michalowicz on your podcast. Mike says the way he learned to run was that he put his sneakers on the toilet. So he'd wake up in the morning, he'd have to pick up the sneakers to go to the bathroom. And now he's like, well, I got my sneakers in my hand. I might as well put them on my feet
and go.
And honestly, I tell people, the first day out, just go. I don't care if you walk for 5 minutes, but make the habit. And then every day, just get a little bit better. And then pretty soon you'll be running.
In my last Unlock the Leader boot camp 2 weeks ago, a gentleman said, I want to get healthier and I want to lose 20 pounds. So we asked the why question, just why and why and why and why. And deep down, 7 layers down, it was because he wants to be able to play with his son as his son grows up. And so that's a whole different ballgame than just wanting to go to the gym. And one thing I tell people is, and you might disagree with me, I don't know, but before you take the step, stop and ask the question, what do I want and why do I want it? So that you can take that step, and that step is one with purpose, right? And so many people don't do that. You know, I coach business owners, and I tell them, I said, listen, even the Formula One racers have to stop in the pit. They've got to get more oil and gas and change the tires. Listen, that pit is trained to do it ridiculously quickly, right? But you've got to stop and just take a breath and ask yourself, in order to lead, what do I want? Who do I need to become? And go from there.
And if you don't know why, then chances are you're on somebody else's train track. And more often than not, I think most people are on someone else's train track. They're climbing the wrong mountain for the wrong reasons, for the wrong goals. And that's why when you ask them, what do you want? They go, oh, I don't know.
Or they're the leader in their family, their business, and they've asked everybody else what they want, and nobody's asked them.
Well, no one's going to ask you. Even if they ask you, they're not going to give it to you. Santa Claus doesn't give you what you want.
Yeah.
You're going to go get it yourself.
Yeah, 100%. Only way to get it.
And if you don't know, then it becomes very difficult.
Very true.
It's time to learn the secrets of life. What's your secret to living an abundant life?
One is my relationship with my family. That's very important to me. My wife, my 3 daughters, the time I spend with them, how I show up for them. That's a secret for me. 2 is looking back at my ancestors, essentially, my father, my grandfather, and remembering the lessons I learned, what to do, like we spoke about in the first 5 minutes of the show, and what not to do. And reminding myself where it could go if I'm on this journey. And 3 for me is my faith. I'm a spiritual person, and that helps me live an abundant life.
And I don't think people put enough time into their wife and kids, and that's why our divorce rates are through the roof. And then their lives become more miserable because half their money disappears. Their time is on someone else's court calendar, and it ain't fun anymore.
Just really quickly, I'll say something. I watched Mrs. Doubtfire yesterday with my kids. And the moment where Robin Williams, gets his kids taken away from him, and then he comes back to be himself as the nanny, and the little daughter hugs him, I lost it. Like, I can't imagine that, it's got to be tough. So continue.
It is very, very tough. And you no longer have control. What did you learn later in life that you wish you would have learned sooner?
That my health is number one. That feeding me is the most important. Simon Sinek wrote the book, Leaders Eat Last. My belief is that eaters should eat first. What I mean by that is look after yourself, be selfish, it's okay.
And we talk about that for business owners. Like, if you are not on a strong foundation, then you can't lead the team.
Yeah.
So you've got to be ready to show up, which means you need to be in the best shape you can be.
With that said, when I say my health, I also want to add in my mental health. I wish I would have gone to therapy and self-development earlier.
They should teach self-development in high school. It would solve half of the anxiety problem. Yeah. Like, if they started teaching that at 6, 7 years old and start telling people, hey, but we don't do it. And so I think that's the second half of the reason all these people have trouble later in life. If you were to give an 18-year-old one specific piece of wisdom, what would it be?
You're either being a positive influence or a negative influence. Your choice.
And at the end of the day, it is their choice.
Yep.
You get to choose.
And all of what you choose has future repercussions.
That it does. If people would like to learn more about your work, your coaching, everything else, where can they find you?
Yeah, you can go to unlocktheleader.com. We have a free download there. It's how to unlock the leader. You can also follow me on social at Yigal Adato, Yigal Adato. I'm the only one out there, so I won't be hard to find. And would love to hear your feedback. When I do podcasts, people send me DMs about what they thought. Please feel free. Shoot me a message. Tell me what you thought about this information.
Thank you so much for joining us today.
Rocky, thank you so much. Honored to be here.
What do you think of when you think of pawn shops? For me, it's a different world and mentality. It's nice to know that he is about providing hope for them when they need it, and that so many people actually get their items back. What do you want? I hope you know the answer. I love hiring to culture. It makes the business so much more fun and in alignment with what you do. Do you feel locked up? It happens to all of us, and in that moment we freeze. Getting unstuck is big. By the way, do you know a leader who could benefit from listening to this episode? I'd really appreciate if you forward them a link so that they can learn, and I know they'll appreciate you for sharing it. And thank you for doing that. Next week, we have on Jonathan Robinson on how to find enlightenment. Thanks for listening. Have an abundant week.